In 1982, Ridley Scott's Blade Runner was released in theaters. While it didn't do that great in the box office, it still managed to become a cult classic among fans of sci-fi and artificial intelligence alike. Roy Batty's fight to break free of the constraints placed on the replicants was extremely compelling, and the questions his story posed on the meaning of humanity were certainly the best part of the film. On the other hand, though, looking back at this movie through a modern lens really highlights the time's flawed view of women. Its glorification of sexual assault is quite frankly disgusting, and has killed any chance of my being invested in Deckard's character. The film ended by seemingly answering the question of whether or not Deckard is a replicant, yet people continue to debate this. And that was certainly the point of the movie. By keeping the truth about Deckard somewhat anonymous, the movie successfully left an impact on the viewer concerning the meaning of humanity. If someone's humanity is debatable, isn't that enough to prove their humanity? Even if they're a machine? In this video, rather than analyzing the original Blade Runner, I would like to see how its message is incorporated in its sequel, Blade Runner 2049. I will analyze the character arcs of the major characters in this film, and by doing so conclude what each character says about what it means to be human. Before we get into the characters though, I think it's important that we first discuss the overall plot, that way I can talk about the characters without having to repeatedly explain plot points. Shortly after the events of the first film, Rachel, a replicant, somehow became pregnant. Following the birth of the child, during which Rachel passed away, Deckard sent the baby away in order to hide the miracle.
Sometimes to love someone, you gotta be a stranger.
Nearly 30 years later, 2049's protagonist, a replicant called K, successfully hunts down and kills one of the men who witnessed the birth, then begins to investigate this medical and scientific marvel. Over the course of his investigation, he comes to suspect that he is the miracle child, eventually leading him to run away from his superiors and take on a new name, Joe. Joe eventually meets Deckard, but in doing so, he inadvertently leads the enemy straight to Deckard. Their leader, Wallace, is an expert replicant designer and wants to study the child in hopes of creating a new model of replicant capable of reproducing. This way, a few hundred years down the line, the replicants could eventually rise up and rule the galaxy. Wallace tries to convince Deckard to tell them where the child is, or at the very least give up the identity of who took the child when he left it. Deckard declines, of course, so they decide to take him off-world to torture him. Joe comes back at the last minute to rescue Deckard, an act that costs him his life. Deckard then meets his child, not Joe, but rather one Dr. Anna Stelline, a replicant memory designer with a rare disorder. So, now that you know the plot, let's talk about the characters. As I mentioned before, the previous film does imply that Deckard is a replicant, but at the same time there is plenty of evidence to the contrary. This makes for a very interesting debate concerning the miracle conception of Anna Stelline. Was it human involvement that allowed Rachel to conceive, or did two replicants somehow do the impossible? No matter which way you look at it though, a replicant gave birth to a child. Just as Jeff Goldblum once said,
"Life, finds a way."
Despite being a Blade Runner, Deckard managed to see the goodness inside Rachel and fell for her. Their love, though, led him to lose everything. So naturally, in the hopes of getting Deckard to talk, Wallace offers him the very thing that his love for Rachel took from him, that being Rachel herself. For a long moment, he can do nothing but stare in astonishment, considering the notion that his long-dead lover might be back with him. She's a perfect replica. The perfect replicant. She might even have the memories of his lover, given that she, holding back tears, asks fearfully if he still loves her. But even still, Deckard, after a long moment of silence, pulls her hand away from him and says,
Her eyes were green.
At first glance, you might think this line simply symbolizes the idea that no matter how hard Wallace tries to mimic humanity, his efforts will never create the perfection he seeks. But in truth, Rachel's eyes were never green, something Deckard is well aware of. The replicant before him is truly a perfect copy of his lost love. So you might ask, why did he say that then? Well, recall that in the first film, when performing the Voight-Kampff test, which determined whether or not a person was a replicant, the tester had to pay careful attention to the eye of the one being tested. It is often said, in fact, that the eye is the window to the soul. So when Deckard looked at this new Rachel in the eyes, he did not see his lover, but rather a cheap imitation of the love they once shared. Rachel's eyes were brown, but these are not Rachel's eyes, so they might as well be green. Through Deckard's trials, we see that humanity can spawn from anything. A replicant can be just as human as any man. Humanity can certainly be engineered, but love, well, that's something entirely different. Despite being in only 3 scenes, Anna is still one of the more compelling characters from either film. She's a scientific anomaly, a medical miracle. As I said earlier, the point of the previous film is that the question of whether Deckard is a human or replicant is irrelevant, because either way, Deckard still acts human. But his daughter is quite literally both. Even if Deckard is a replicant, Anna was born just as any human is. She represents the undeniable truth that replicants are just as human as we are. She's the embodiment of humanity itself, yet despite this, she is forever separated from both humans and replicants. You see, Anna has a rare disorder likely due to the uncanny nature of her conception. This disorder compromised her immune system, so she's forced to always quarantine inside the laboratory she's employed at. Anna, again the embodiment of humanity, is contracted by Wallace to create memories for replicants. She literally gives replicants their humanity. Something
to think back on and smile.
It's nice.
And it is. Despite being stuck alone in her bubble ever since she was 8, Anna has made it her life's mission to create joyful memories for the replicants, despite having none herself. Her life is truly a tragedy. Her mother died in childbirth, her father had to abandon her, and her adopted parents eventually did the same. She knows that life is full of ups and downs, that life can never be good if it is never bad. It's sort of like what Syndrome said about superpowers.
And when everyone's super, no one will be.
Wallace is well aware of this too, so it became illegal to give replicants real memories. Wallace wants his replicants to think they're human, not actually be human. Even so though, Anna thinks it is only kind to help the replicants feel real. So she broke the law at least on one occasion by giving Kay one of her memories. In it, she was beaten up by other orphans after hiding her toy horse, her sole possession, in a furnace. Through this act of kindness, by giving Kay one of her own memories, she set into motion everything that happens in 2049. This memory allowed him to recognize the date carved into the tree, which led him to the toy horse, which led him to her, and then to Deckard. It is thanks to this memory that Kay had an understanding of the importance of one's own property, and by extension, one's own choices. Anna's choice to risk everything in the hopes of giving Kay a meaningful past eventually led him to make the choice to sacrifice himself to give Anna a meaningful future. Sure, Kay is disappointed by the fact that he isn't the miracle child, that he isn't loved, but at the end of the film he comes to an important understanding. Love is stronger than anything, more important than anything. It cannot be replicated, though humanity will certainly try to do just that. Joy is, at least for me, the most thought-provoking character from either film. She's a holographic AI designed to bring a sense of companionship into the lives of lonely individuals, whether human or replicant. At the start of the film, she's the only thing that Kay cares about, to the point that he even spends his bonus on her. Like I said, his memory of the orphanage gives him an appreciation for choice. Since the emulator allows Joy to leave the room, it is through the emulator that he bestows that freedom of choice onto Joy.
Honey, you can go anywhere you want in the world now. Where do you want to go first?
She goes to the roof and stands in the rain for the first time, clearly astonished by this new experience. Kay looks on, happy for her, happy that she can finally live. But can you even call this life? She's robbed of the happiest moment of her existence by a freaking phone call! This question doesn't stop Kay from caring about her though. There are multiple moments in these first 2 scenes in which Kay expresses his desire for her to think for herself. He chooses to love her and he wants her to choose to reciprocate that, not simply do that because she's programmed to. But when he returns to work, what is it that the ironically named love tells him?
I see you're also a customer. Are you satisfied with our product?
Ana de Armas was the perfect cast for this role. Her sweet personality and attractive looks immediately get the viewer to take kindly to her. Throughout the first 2 acts of the film, she continuously acts selflessly in the hopes of aiding Kay, who she later renames Joe after realizing he might be the miracle child. She cooks him a fake holographic dinner, asks him to read a book she hates, fuses with a hooker in order to sleep with him, and even offers to transfer her code into the emulator, a decision that would kill her should the emulator be broken. Eventually, of course, it is, by none other than love.
I do hope you're satisfied with our product.
I love you.
How chilling is that? Love killed the one thing in the world that Joe loved. The one thing that seemingly loved Joe. I've watched this movie twice now, and that scene hit me like a freight train both times. I'd love to say that Joy is by far the most kind and lovable character in either film, but the cold truth is that she's neither of these things. She spends the entire movie acting selflessly, not because she chooses to, but rather because that is what she's programmed to do. She's designed to help her owner pursue his desires, whether they be to escape a drab and lonely existence, or unravel a massive cover-up. Her final, desperate I love you was, as much as it pains me to say it, nothing more than what she was programmed to say should the emulator be destroyed. Joy is simply an attempt by big business to profit off of a facade of joy in a world deprived of any genuine sense of happiness. Even the name she bestowed on Kate earlier in the film, Joe, is the name the product gives everyone by default.
You look like a good Joe.
It is impossible to recreate love, because to love, one must be able to live. And to live, one must be able to do the one thing that Joy, despite Kay's urging, is unable to do. Choose. Finally, it's time to talk about the main character of this freaking movie. Kay is both a replicant and a Blade Runner, and his life is certainly a depressing one. His model of replicant was designed to obey easier than those before him, so Kay has no choice but to spend his life grinding the 9 to 5, killing his own kind. Then in his downtime, he resides in a small apartment eating slop alongside his holographic girlfriend. That is, until he witnesses a miracle. After discovering that a child was born from a replicant, his boss orders him to hunt down and kill the miracle child, but quite possibly for the first time in his existence, he resists.
I've never retired something that was born before.
What's the difference?
To be born is to have a soul, I guess.
Are you telling me no?
I wasn't aware that was an option, man.
This may be due to how he was designed, but Kay believes that neither he nor any of the replicants he's killed have souls. This means that in Kay's mind, replicants don't matter. To him, they are simply the many expendable cogs in the machine of society. This is proven by what he and his boss say next.
Hey, you've been getting on fine without one.
What's that, man?
A soul.
It's only after he begins to believe that he is the miracle child that he comes to value his own life, because it is at this point that he believes he has a soul. With a soul, his life matters. He's not expendable. He has the ability, the choice, to change his life. He goes to find the horse, he lies to his boss, he talks to Stelline. The fact that he fails his baseline test is also evidence of his newfound feeling of self-worth. He meets Deckard, and while talking to the man he thinks is his father, Kay fully embraces the name Joe. He finally embraces his humanity, only for him to find out a few scenes later that he isn't the miracle child. He also realizes that Joy's love for him was a facade, and that by extension his love for her was a waste. He has nowhere left to go, nothing left to do. He can't return to his old life because he would be killed, and the new life he once embraced was never his to begin with. He thinks for a moment that his life is truly meaningless, except that it isn't. This adventure has given him something he's valued for so long: choice. He can do anything, go anywhere, and more importantly, he can be who he chooses to be. He doesn't have to spend his existence killing his own kind any longer. Instead, he now has the opportunity to help liberate them. but doing so would require him to kill Deckard. He mulls the idea over, but it isn't the request by the Resistance to kill Deckard that sticks with him. Rather, it's something their leader said that he takes to heart.
Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
Joe has two options here. He can either do what the Resistance asks of him and kill Deckard, or try to save the old man. He chooses the latter, of course, but don't mistake this act as selflessness. His sacrifice is certainly a noble one, sure, but he didn't die for Deckard. He died for himself. By killing Deckard, he would have acted in service of the replicants' hatred towards humanity, but by saving Deckard, he gave Deckard the chance to meet his daughter. He chose love over hate, clearly the better cause to fight for, the better cause to die for. And that is what makes Joe human. This is the meaning of Blade Runner 2049. Whether someone is a man or a replicant is irrelevant. To be human is to have meaning, a meaning brought about by one's ability to choose. So whenever you find yourself at a crossroads, whether that be deciding what kind of ice cream you want or what career to pursue, remember that your choices matter. And should anyone ever try to take away your freedom to choose, know this: they will never succeed. They can arrest you, they can enslave you, and they can even kill you. But you will always have free will. And if you have free will, you have a soul. And if you have a soul, you are undisputedly human. Blade Runner 2049 more than stays true to the message of the previous film. It applies Blade Runner's theme to all the major characters of 2049. This is not only one of the best sequels I've ever seen, but also one of the best films of the past decade. So be sure to watch it someday, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Hope you have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Oh, one more thing before you go. If any of y'all are interested in me doing videos on Blade Runner Black Lotus when it airs this fall, let me know in the comments. See ya.